Hello, all you digital wizards out there. Today we are continuing our pop-up texture demo by lighting and rendering our soda pop cans. Let's get started. Last time we went over how to UV map our model and attach a texture to that model. One of the first things I want you to notice in that material tab to the right is that there's tons of options. These options can give your can some shiny qualities, decide how much reflection you want, or even make your can glow a radioactive color. However, it is important to note that many of these material options are hard to see without lighting. So let's talk lighting. First thing we want to do is go to the Add button and insert a plane from the Mesh tab. This plane is going to allow us to see some shadows. Now, if you are concerned about being able to click certain things, up here on the right, it will actually have everything that you need and you can click from one to the next. Our next step is to actually add in some lights. Adding in lights is fairly simple. You go to the Add tab, go down to Lights, and for this time, we're going to actually add in a spotlight. Another thing to note is we are using a strategy called a 3-point light system. So we'll be adding in 3 different lights. One will be a backlight, one will be our key light, and one will be an overall light that kind of just gives it a fill, or otherwise known as a fill light. For my first light, I'm going to bring it above and to the front of my soda can. Now, you can angle this a little off to the side if you want, but you want it to be facing the front part of what you want to see. Your backlight is going to be the opposite. It's going to be coming in from the back side. But over on the right hand side, you can see that there are different options. I'm bringing up my light source here, bringing up the watts. And I can also change the color of my light to like a yellow or any other color I want to use. Can change the radius, so that would be as, the range of the light, things like that. I definitely suggest playing with your light and trying to figure out what works best for your scene. Now I'm going to add in yet another spotlight. This one's going to be my backlight. So again, that's going to be Add, go down to Lights, and then Spotlight. I'm going to use this spotlight to be sort of the reflection of the original light. That means that this light should not be as strong as my key light. My key light is the first light I bring in. This is my second light, which is the backlight. That backlight will be kind of going the opposite direction of my key light. I can always just slightly move it a little bit to get some differentiation, but the main idea is that this light is not going to be as strong, and it's going to kind of serve also as a rim light, so we have a little bit of light reflecting back onto the back of the can. Another thing you should keep in mind is that you don't necessarily have to make the second light the same color. Sometimes it helps to make it a different color. And as you can see, it makes a different lighting source there, and that's because it's a little too close to the ground where it's hitting. So I might have to lift that up a little bit. So keep that in mind when you're doing that, but you can see the back of the can is lit a little bit. I'm changing it to more of a bluish light, and it's going to give it a different feel and give it a little bit of a rim around the edges when we're looking at it. Now, I can't render any of this until I bring in a camera, but I want to make sure that I add in that fill light first. Before any of that, now that I have some lights, I'm actually going to click my can so I can get back to my materials and adjust my materials. So I'm going to click the can, and you can see I'm going to go back to that little beach ball and make sure that I can adjust my materials. And this is going to allow me to add in that shine or anything else that I think that the can might need to make it look a little more realistic. Once I'm finished up with my material, I'm going to go back up to that Add section, go to Light, and add in a sunlight. This is going to be my fill light. A sunlight is awesome for this because it fills a general area versus trying to center around the cone. So that nice sunlight's going to just fill the whole area. You can see that it's already lit up that plane that we put on the bottom and lit up the can as well. And I can of course adjust the color as well as the strength of my light if needed. But there is my 3-point system. It looks pretty good. We basically kind of want to make a triangle with that 3-point system. So you'll have the sunlight, the key light, and your backlight. So my can's looking pretty good at this point. The lights have definitely helped a lot with that shiny quality and the material for sure. So now that our can is looking good, we're going to go back to add in a camera so that we can start the rendering process. One of the things you may be noticing when I'm trying to move this camera is that the dongle or the gizmo is not positioned right. So I'm just going to go to the top and switch it to local. And all that means is that it's the turns and the rotations and the moves are now all localized to the object that I'm trying to move. And it just makes moving it just a little bit easier. Another thing that you should think of is actually the shortcut key. If you press 0 on your number pad, that's the number pad 0 on your keyboard, it will actually go into the camera view. Just like that. So that's really helpful, and to get out of the camera view, all you have to do is rotate out. So every time you press 0 on that number pad, it zooms into that camera view so you can kind of make sure that it's looking just the way you want it to look. Once you get the camera right where you want it, you will want to press the shortcut key to render. That shortcut key is function 12 or F12 at the top of your keyboard. Now, just because we now know how to render doesn't mean we are done with our render. First, we want to make sure any final adjustments to our lights and materials are done. Then before we finish up with our scene, we want to check out our render options. You're going to find those render options in your preferences on the right under the tab that looks like an old TV, just under the wrench and screwdriver. First things first, you want to change your sampling to about 250. Sampling is how often the computer is taking a sample of the scene to decide what it should look like. The more samples, the more accurate it can become. However, too many samples and it can slow down your render tremendously, so 250 is a pretty good number. Next, you'll want to turn on your ambient occlusion. This will create contact shadows. Those are the shadows that appear when one object touches or gets close to another. In this case, it will be the contact shadow of the can touching the ground plane. I also decided to quickly add a material to my ground plane. You of course don't need to do that, but it is certainly fun to play with. Other options you can add are light bloom and depth of field. Depth of field is how something can appear blurry in the camera if it's too close or too far away. It is a great way to add some depth to your scene. For our lesson, we are going to skip subsurface scattering because it's not often used for solid objects, but for translucent objects. For example, how light can travel through a human ear and light it with a bit of a pink glow. We will also be skipping motion blur, since that is used with moving objects and our can is sitting still. However, shadows are a must-have, and we will certainly adjust those options. Lastly, you can play with color management to adjust the contrast or how the render comes out. Overall, these are your options. Once you have them looking the way you want, you can render it using F12. To save your render, you'll want to go to the word image at the top of your render window and then to save as. Once there, you can choose where you would like to save your image. Desktop is always a good choice. There you have it. You've completed the pop of texture tutorial. Until next time, keep it magical.